Live stream. Okay na. Get start na. Reg, okay na. Start na. Alright. Alright, so magandang umaga, good morning. Isang mapagpalayang araw po sa ating lahat. And welcome to our activity for today, which is part of our celebration of the Linggo ng Kolehiyo ng Agham Panlipunan at Pilosopiya and the 150th birth anniversary of Rafael Palma, who is the fourth president of the University of the Philippines and the esteemed figure for whom our renowned building Palma Hall is named. The theme of our celebration is Alma, Alma, mga lektura para sa sesquicentenaryo ni Rafael V. Palma, as well as the 60th anniversary of the UP Population Institute. This event is co-sponsored by UPPI, the UP College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, and the Department of Health. This event also serves as the third in a series of pre-conference webinars for the 2024 National Conference of Family Planning, which will be held on November 20 and 21 at Crown Plaza, Manila Galleria, with the theme Family Planning and Population Development, Innovate, Collaborate, and Accelerate Now. My name is Ryan Pagirigan at ako po ang moderator o tagapagpadaloy ng ating programa ngayong umaga. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge our participants who are joining in via Zoom and Facebook. Maraming salamat din sa ating on-site participants ng aking Demo 1 WFU class. So maraming salamat sa inyong interes at sa inyong pagsama sa ating usapin ngayong umaga. At mapalad tayong makasama si Dr. Christian Joy P. Cruz. Siya po ang magbibigay ng lecture na may titulong Beyond the Binary, a Spotlight on the Risk Behaviors and Well-Being of Gender and Sexual Minority Youth. Dr. Christian Joy P. Cruz is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines Population Institute. She earned her PhD in public policy from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and holds a Master in Business Administration and Master of Arts in Demography from UP Diliman. Her research interests span a range of topics, including formal demography, aging, survey methodology, and public policy. Dr. Cruz has played a key role in major research initiatives such as the Longitudinal Study of Aging and Health in the Philippines, National Migration Survey, Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study, and the Hong Kong Generations and Gender Survey. She's currently the president of the Philippine Population Association. So to start the ball rolling, I will now give the floor to Dr. C. Joy Cruz for her lecture. Ms. Joy.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ryan, for that very kind introduction. So welcome to the people in person as well as those online for this lecture looking at the risk behaviors and well-being of young people, not only between males and females, but we want to go beyond the binary, looking at specifically gender and sexual minority young people in the Philippines. So we're going to define, later, I'm going to define gender and sexual minority youth. So sino ba yung kasama dito sa group na ito? And why do we want to put a spotlight on them? Okay? So I'll try to make the lecture short so that we can, open the floor for your comments and questions and clarifications. So this will be the outline of my presentation. First, I'm going to start with a background of the study, and part of this section, I will be defining terms, concepts. We will be defining concepts for us to zero in to the definition of what a gender minority is and what's sexual minority is. And then I will be giving you the rationale for doing this particular study and introduce you to the data sets that I've used for this particular lecture. And then I'll be presenting results. So we will be providing you with empirical evidence on the current situation of young people in the country, both males and females, and also across sexual orientation and gender identity, which I will be defining later. So there will be 4 sections for the results. Let me start with the profile, and then we will be discussing health risk behaviors. I'll be telling you later what indicators of use, as well as sexual risk behaviors of young people, and also their health status and life satisfaction. And then towards the end, we'll be putting particular spotlights on the results for gender and sexual minority groups. And then we're going to do some policy implications. So let me start with the background. Okay. Uh, Hopefully we're okay online. So I hope they're hearing us very well. So why do we need to study young people? Diba? So it's in this particular year, so it's during puberty and adolescent stage to young adulthood that, it's a very important stage in a person's life because it's the time wherein you develop your identity. It's the time wherein you develop your social skills. It's the time you think about your future careers, your education, and it's also the period wherein you forge, relationships with other people. You form peer groups or friendships. And sexuality plays an important role in healthy adolescent development as it's a primary aspect of human identity. So developing a healthy sexual identity during these formative years can translate into better self-esteem, having positive relationships, and fulfilled lives. So being aware of their sexuality can help young people make informed choices, reduce, engagement in risky behaviors, and be able to establish healthy patterns that may last into adulthood. So everybody follows particular developmental pathways. Okay. So it can be similar in some ways and different in some ways. So where everybody is navigating through these developmental stages, some experiences prejudice, discrimination, and violence. And basically because of being different. Okay. And this marginalization negatively affects their overall well-being. And because this negatively affects their well-being, this can result to emotional distress, and it results to them to being more prone into engaging into risky behaviors, both health behaviors and sexual risky behaviors. So it's in this particular context that this study came about, and I wanted to examine the risky behaviors of young Filipinos. I stated here between and beyond males and females because we always do in demography and population studies, we always break down our analysis by age and by sex, which I'll going to explain in detail later. We will also do that in this particular lecture and study. We disaggregate data by sex, but we want to go beyond. No? We want to identify particular subgroups of the population that might be more vulnerable into engaging into more risky sexual or non-sexual behaviors. So specifically, this study assesses whether membership in gender and sexual minority groups is associated with a higher likelihood of engaging in risky behaviors, have poorer health, and report less life satisfaction. That's among young adults in the country. So as I mentioned earlier, in demography and population studies, we break down, population data by age and by sex. Why is it important? I think this was discussed in your demo 1 classes, no? So it's very important because these are the 2 demographic variables that are important because it affects, the 3 main drivers of population change. That's fertility, mortality, and migration. For example, more males, unfortunately, more males have males have the higher probability of dying compared to females, for example. Okay, and we also know that across ages there are differences in the risk of dying. That's for mortality. For migration, for example, more females, diba, migrate. That's why we have feminization of labor migration in the country. So more females migrate for work, for employment compared to males. And also, you have a particular age group that have the higher probability of migrating compared to the other, diba? Those in the working age group are the ones more likely to migrate. And of course, for fertility, we know that women are the ones giving birth. Diba? That's why we usually look at the women, the population of women age 15 to 49, which will be the reproductive years of women, because it also affects fertility. Okay? And then we also go beyond age and sex in demography. Like we also look at education, because demographers and population scientists now are saying that education is the third most important demographic variable. Kasi nga, it also affects fertility, mortality, migration. It also affects nuptiality or marriage. It also affects urbanization. Diba? And we also go beyond age, sex, and education. Sometimes we do analysis, disaggregating data by type of residence, urban and rural. For example, we know that rural women have higher fertility compared to women from urban areas. You know, and sometimes we also do disaggregation by socioeconomic status, etc. Now, we want to add additional variables to be able to highlight, diba, differences among subgroups. That's the intent of this particular study. And here, I wanted to look at the effect of sexuality and identity, gender, you know, in the risky behaviors of young people like you in this room right now. Okay? So, to be able to help us understand the findings, let us first define concepts, no, related to gender minority and sexual minority. For us to be able to understand who belongs to the gender minority and the sexual minority, we have to understand first particular concepts that's related to it. That's sex, gender, gender identity. You might have heard some of this, and you might probably know some of this. You also have the concept of gender expression and sexual orientation. And then after defining these concepts, we zero in into operationally defining what gender minority is and what sexual minority is. Okay? Okay, so let's start with sex versus gender. So sex is your biological status as male or female. That's the binary. So at birth, diba? Based on your genitalia, the health attendant, you know, will identify whether you're male or female. Okay? If you want to be more technical, if you're born with a penis, you're going to be assigned male at birth. And then if you have a vagina, you're going to be assigned female at birth. And that's already part of your identity. It's part of your record. That's part of your birth certificate. You don't have anything to do with it. It's the birth attendants who decides your sex. Okay? And in other cases, there will be gray areas. No? There are babies born that has ambiguous genitalia. No? Even doctors would not be able to identify if it's a vagina or a penis. So there are people who belong to particular categories that's not labeled male or female. But unfortunately, society is constrained to identifying babies based on the genitalia, male and female, specifically for the Philippine context. I think there are countries now that they include male, female, others in their birth certificates. Okay? But for the Philippines, we're still very strict with the binary. So it's either you're male or you're female based on your genitalia. And our doctors are very powerful because they're the ones assigning your sex at birth. Okay? And sometimes if they don't know, they cannot identify your sex based on your genitalia, they check your chromosomes, they check your hormones. Okay? And there are instances that, okay, you might have not ambiguous genitalia, you identified male or female at birth, but through the course of puberty, your body changes and there's, instead of you producing the correct hormones, it produces the hormones for the opposite sex. And because of that, your sex characteristics changes at puberty. No? So there will be instances of those. So yun yung tinatawag nating intersex condition. So the old term is hermaphrodite. Hindi na ginagamit yung term na yon. Kasi for hermaphrodite, it means you have functional penis and vagina, which is biologically impossible. Okay? Kaya ngayon, coming from the community itself, they call themselves intersex conditions. So these are people whose characteristics, physical attributes, does not fit perfectly into the binary of male and female. Okay? So physical attributes when you talk about sex and sex characteristics. Okay? And next, you have gender. So gender is a social construct which encompasses roles, behaviors, and attributes. And this hinges on a particular culture. So a particular society and culture defines what a male person is and what a female person is. Diba? And it can be different depending on the culture. So even the roles. Like for example, in the conservative Philippines, we already have particular expectation of what a female is and what a male person is. Diba? In terms of how they look, how, their roles in society, at home, in school, in the community at large. Okay? So there's a difference between sex and gender. Now we go to the concept of gender identity. So what's gender identity? Gender identity is this sense of being male, female, both, or neither. Diba? So all of us, as we develop as human beings, we're going to have that particular sense of identity, whether we're male or female. Okay? And it does not have anything to do with your genitalia or your chromosomes. It's how you feel, who you think you are. Either you're male or female, or for other people, they go beyond male or female. Some people would say, I'm both male and female. And some people would say, I'm neither male or female. So you have people who wants to challenge the binary of being male and female. Okay? So your gender identity, so this is womanness and being a woman or being a man. Okay? That's your identity. That's your gender. Okay? And it's different from expression. So these are two distinct concepts. So gender identity, as I mentioned, resolves itself independently from a person's assigned sex at birth and also from their their expression of their gender as well as their sexual orientation. So it's an independent, part of a person. Now let's go to gender expression. So gender expression is the way you express or you communicate your gender identity. Okay? So it's through how you talk, how you dress, your mannerisms, your hairstyle. Diba? So that's gender expression. So magkakadugtong yon. So you have sex assignment at birth, you have gender identity, and then you express your gender in many different ways. Okay? Sometimes you were confined with the expectations from your particular context. Sometimes you don't. Diba? So that's how you express your gender. So you have particular streams, either you're very masculine or you're very feminine. And sometimes people will be in between. Diba? Sometimes you're boyish, sometimes you're feminine. Or you can be both. Kasi you have particular different categories on how you, or different elements on how you express your gender. You might be muscularly built, pero you want to wear a skirt. Diba? Because that's how you want to express your gender. Okay? And as I want to emphasize, this concept is different from gender identity. Okay? That sense of being, your identity, and expression is how you communicate that sense of your being. Being either male, female, neither, or both, male or female. Okay? Now we go to another concept. You have sexual orientation. So sexual orientation is to whom you're sexually romantically attracted to. Okay? So this is your attraction to someone else. It can be towards another male or female or both. Or in the extreme, sometimes you're not attracted to anyone. You're attracted to yourself. Diba? You're attracted to animals. You're attracted to the trees. So that's sexual orientation. That's emotional, romantic, and sexual attraction to another person. Okay? To another person. And usually, these are the general terms. It doesn't cover everybody. So first, if you're attracted to the opposite sex only, then you're heterosexual. If you're attracted to the same sex only, you're homosexual. You're attracted to both, you're bisexual. And of course, there are other categorizations now, like there's polysexual, there's demisexual. So these are additional variations. If you're not attracted to anyone, then you're asexual. Okay? So these are new categorizations, but this will be still the general categorization. Either you're heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual. Okay? That's in terms of your sexual orientation. And we know growing up, there's particular societal prescription. Diba? Starting with the family, you're preconditioned by your parents, by your siblings and cousins to act a particular way, to identify a particular way. Diba? Hindi, you're male. So you have to have your hair short. That's your expression of you're male. Kasi you have a penis at birth. So you're conditioned. Starting with your family, and then your neighbors, and then when you start going to school. Diba? So parang sinasabi niya, kailangan you follow this particular path. That's the social prescription. And what's the general social prescription that we have? Okay? Ayan na yung kumakembot na animation. So what's the prescribed connection? So let's take this particular instance here. So this baby was born with a penis, so they were assigned male at birth. Di ba? Kasi simple yung buhay. May penis, assigned male at birth, and then this baby identifies as male or boy or man. That's their gender identity. And then you should, according to society, because you're male, then you have to present yourself, communicate your gender through the expectations of society. And that will be masculine manner. Tama? That's the social prescription. And you should be attracted to the opposite sex. So yan yung preconditioning. Not only by your family, not only by your school, but the society at large. Kasi that's the particular expectation. And you have the counterpart for females. So if your sex assignment at birth aligns with your gender identity, the new term that they say that you can use will be cisgender. Because it aligns, di ba? Yung sex assignment mo at birth and your gender identity. Okay? And then if you're attracted to the opposite sex, then you're heterosexual. So you're cisgender heterosexual male. Okay? And then you have the female counterpart. Okay? Born with a vagina, assigned female at birth, identifies as a woman or female, and then expresses herself in the feminine and then attracted to only boys. Okay? So that's the prescription. Most people would follow the social prescription. Ito yon. So lahat tayo, everybody has sex assignment at birth, you have a gender identity, you have a particular way of expressing your gender, and you have a sexual orientation. Everybody has it. Okay? And this is the social prescription. However, in reality, not everybody follows the social prescription. Let's have an example. I will not be able to cover everything, but let's have particular examples so we'll be able to define what gender minority and sexual minorities are. So let's start with this. So you have a person born male because of genitalia, may penis siya, assigned male at birth, but identifies as female. Okay? Identifies as a woman, as a girl. In this case, because the gender identity does not align with their sex assignment at birth, then they're called transsexual. Okay? And then some would express themselves in the feminine, some not. Okay? And then, wag muna natin pakialaman kung kanino sila nagkakagusto. They can either be attracted to males or females or both or neither of the genders. What we're talking about here is gender identity not aligning with their sex assignment at birth. Okay? And then, of course, you have a counterpart for those born female, assigned female at birth. Some of them would identify as males, and then they would express themselves in the masculine or not, still feminine, just to follow the norms. And then they can be attracted to anyone, males, females. So that's one particular path. Okay? What are the other connections? So born male, assigned male at birth, identifies still as male, but expresses in the feminine. Okay? So these people are considered transgender. So transgender is an umbrella term that, includes people whose gender identity and gender expression does not align with their sex assignment at birth. So transsexuals are under the umbrella of transgender. Okay? So this is another particular path. And you have the counterpart. So you have female identifies still a female, girl or woman, but expresses in the masculine. Okay? They can be considered transgender. But the person might not consider themselves transgender. That's why in the West, they have a particular group called non-conforming, gender non-conforming people. They just do not want to conform with the binary of being male and female. So stop tayo doon and let's define what gender minority is. Okay? So gender minority will be individuals whose gender identity and expression is different from their sex assignment at birth. So if you don't follow what's the social prescription up to gender identity and expression, then you belong to the gender minority. So they can be trans people, transsexual, transgender. Some would identify as non-binary. No. They're not male or female, or they're both male and female. These people are bigender, and as I mentioned, it's possible to have gender non-conforming individuals. Okay? So gender non-conforming individuals has this state of one's physical appearance or behaviors not aligning with societal expectations of their gender. Okay? Pwedeng feminine boy or masculine girl. So these people would belong to the gender minority. Okay? And because they're different, it's possible that they're subjected to hate, discrimination, prejudice, stigma. And it makes life difficult for them as well. Okay? Now we've defined gender minority. Now we go on further for us to be able to define sexual minority. Ano ba yung other connections? So you have these other connections. So you still have male assigned at birth, identify as male, is still, masculine in terms of their expression, but they do not follow the prescription for to whom they should be attracted to. Here, they're attracted to males. Okay? And in this case, they're considered homosexual. Ibig sabihin, they're attracted to males only, the same sex only. And then you have the counterpart. So females identify as females, expresses in the feminine, but attracted to, sexually, romantically attracted to females. Okay? So you have the gays and the lesbians. So these are the more common terms that we use. And then the other connections will be this. Diba? They can be attracted to both males and females. Okay? So these are the bisexual people. And then you have the counterpart. So given this particular connections, now we'll be able to define sexual minority. So if you're a non-heterosexual, big sabihin, you're not attracted only to the opposite sex. Then you now belong to the sexual minority. Kasi you're different from the majority. Diba? If you follow the expectation that you're only attracted romantically and sexually to the opposite sex, diba? You belong to the majority. So if you don't, then you belong to the sexual minority. So sino ba kasama dito? So it can be the gays, or homosexual men, homosexual women, or the lesbians. And then you have bisexuals. We also have the demisexuals. So that's another definition. You have polysexuals, pansexuals, asexuals. So lahat, as long as you don't follow what's the expected societal prescription of attraction to the opposite sex, then you belong to the sexual minority. So at least up to this point, we've already defined gender minority, and sexual minority. So we're going to use that later when we disaggregate our data, no? Looking at behaviors of young people like you, and then we look through them. We apart from looking at males and females, we also look at the difference between heterosexuals, gays, lesbians, etc. And also by gender identity. Okay? Okay, so what data did I use? So I used the young adult fertility and sexuality data sets, both the fourth and the fifth round. So originally, it's referred to as the Young Adult Fertility Survey, and it started in 1982 by Dr. Corazon Raimundo. And then in 1982, females lang, only female youth were interviewed, because the focus then was to provide indicators on the fertility of young women at the time we're in. The average number of children was about 5 per woman of reproductive ages 15 to 49. Okay? So in 1994, males were added, in the study. And fertility indicators became part of a larger data set. And YAFS was extended to include a wide range of topics on adolescent health, adolescent sexuality, and reproductive health. And you also have to take note that the rich findings of the YAFs have been used in the formulation of programs and policies of the government for education, health, and welfare of the youth. Okay, so ginamit din siya for the Philippine Development Plans as well as the Youth Development Plan of the National Youth Commission. And the most recent round of YAFs was in 2021 at the height of the pandemic, and it aims to provide updated indicators to inform the Department of Health's Adolescent and Health Development Program. So we've covered all the 17 regions. This was in 2013. That's YAFs round 4. 17 regions, 78 provinces, covering about 17,000 households. And we interviewed 19,178 young people at the time in 2013. And then for YAFs 5, yeah, still we've covered all the 17 regions. And interviewed 10,949 young people. So ganun siya kadami. And the response rate for young people is about 77%. And the YAFs, as I mentioned, originally focused on fertility, but it has evolved over time. So we wanted to be abreast on current or contemporary issues faced by the young people. And as you can see in this slide here, YAFs 5, the one that I also use in this analysis, covers a wide range of topics from just 7 major topics in 1982 to 12 sections in 2013. Now, for the 5th round, it contains 14 major topic groups. And one of the topic groups that form part of this presentation is Block L. So we have a dedicated section on sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And I think we're the only one. This is the only study in the country that included, these questions here. So it's a pioneering effort from the YAFS team. So now let me go into the results. So we've defined gender minority, we've defined sexual minority. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 sections in terms of the results. Let me start with the first one. So let's just look muna at the simplest one, which is the profile of the young people in terms of age, in terms of sex, in terms of their gender identity, their expression, and their sexual orientation. So how did we operationally define and how did we collect the data in terms of age and sex for YAS5? No? So we asked them their age. So how old were you on your last birthday? And then the interviewers record the age in completed years. So in demography, we record age in completed years. And usually we validate this by asking the birth date. And then you cross-validate it with the age, the date of interview to be able to calculate for the age and check if it matches the reported age in completed years. And then we also ask them about their sex assignment at birth, either male or female at birth. Okay? And these are the results. So for the sample, about 59% are young people, age 15 to 19. And then 41% is belong to the age group 20 to 24. And slightly there are more females in the sample. 51% are females compared to 49% males. Okay? So in terms of gender identity, we asked these two questions here. So we try to follow best practices from other countries. So we have one question and we have the two-question approach. The first question here is the one-step approach, wherein we try to define what transgender is muna. Kasi I mean, it's not everybody knows what the meaning of transgender is, okay? So here we explain some people describe themselves as transgender when they experience a different gender identity from their sex at birth. For example, a person who is assigned male at birth but who feels female or lives as a woman would be transgender. And then we ask them the question, do you consider yourself to be transgender? And the categories will be yes, no, and not sure. And the other approach is the two-step approach. As I mentioned earlier, we collected data on sex assignment at birth, and then we asked them the question, do you currently consider yourself to be a man, trans man, woman, trans woman, non-binary, and others? Okay? So that's the two-step approach. Binabangga natin siya with the sex assignment at birth. If it does not match, then they belong to the gender minority. Okay? So here are the results. So you can see that indeed they're the minority. Tama? So a lot of those who were assigned male at birth, still identify as a man or as male. Okay? About 98 and 97% of them. Okay? So less than 2% identifies otherwise. And then same is true for those who were assigned female at birth. Okay? So that's the case for gender identity across gender identity. Now we go to gender expression. How did we ask the question? We have two questions, no? The indicator will be appearance, style, or dress. And then the other is mannerisms. So the question was like, how do you think people would describe your appearance, style, or dress? And the other question is, describe your mannerisms. The respondents were provided with a flashcard listing. Nandun yung listahan ng categories. Either they're very feminine, somewhat feminine, equally feminine and masculine, somewhat masculine, very masculine. So what they think other people, how other people would describe their gender expression. Okay? So that's how we ask it. And ito yung results. It's very interesting. So this one is in terms of appearance, style, or dress. So it changed. So only about 58% and 62% said other people would describe their gender expression in terms of appearance, style, or dressing to be very masculine. And then you have combination. And then on the other extreme, you have less than 2% who said na very feminine sila, even if their sex assignment at birth is male. Okay? And also, you have that particular pattern for females. Although you can see that for females, more of them reported that they're equally feminine and masculine. That's how they think other people would describe their appearance, style, or dressing, manner of dressing. Okay? Now we go to the other indicator, mannerisms. So you still have the same pattern. So hindi na siya very feminine or very masculine at the extreme end. But kanina, we saw that for in terms of gender identity, it's about 98%. But in terms of expressing their gender identity, it changes. Kasi you have both male and female expression, masculine and feminine expressions. Okay? And that's in terms of mannerisms. Now, let's go to sexual orientation. This is a little bit tricky because sexual orientation is a difficult concept to measure and operationalize. No, walang clear-cut way for us to be able to identify or group people by sexual orientation. So, scholars and experts are saying there are three dimensions or three elements of sexual orientation, especially if you collect survey data on sexual orientation. One will be sexual identity. Second will be sexual attraction. And the third is sexual behavior. Okay? Sexual identity refers to how a person identifies with regard their sexual orientation, such as heterosexual, gay, or lesbian, or bisexual. Okay? And because of that, you'll be able to identify if they're attracted to purely the opposite sex or the same sex or both. That's another dimension of sexual orientation. And then the last one is sexual behavior. Ito, they've already engaged in sex. So this is the sex of the sexual partners. The complication is sometimes these things does not align. Some would identify as gay, but they're purely attracted to the same sex. And when they engage in sexual activities, they're engaged in sex with the same sex. Diba? So for the YAFs round, we try to factor in these three elements and try to collect data on these three elements here. How they identify, to whom they're attracted to, and the sex of their sexual partners. Okay? So, masyado siya madaming elements. So for this presentation, we will be focusing only on one element, the identity. No? The simplest one muna. Okay? The simplest one. But before we do the risky behaviors, let's start with how they identify themselves. So ito muna yung how we operationally define it. So these are the questions that we ask in terms of identity, in terms of attraction, and in terms of behavior. So the first one, at the moment, do you think of yourself as lesbian, gay, bisexual, straight? That is not lesbian, gay, nor bisexual, and others. Okay? And then we ask the respondent to identify how they identify themselves in terms of their sexual orientation. And then On attraction naman, we ask them, regardless if you are sexually active or not, to whom have you felt sexually attracted, even if you did not take any action based on feeling attracted? Remember, the respondents are young people, 15 to 19, 20 to 24. Diba? So some of them have not been attracted to anyone yet. Some of them have not been sexually active yet. Okay? The categories for the attraction dimension will be only to women, never to men, both to women and men, only to men, never to women, and I have never felt sexually attracted to anyone. Okay? And then for behavior, this one is a little bit complicated. So we have questions on romantic relationships, and we have, many questions about sex. This is a sexuality survey. So we've asked them about different sexual activities and to whom they had been engaging sex with. Doon nanggaling yung behavior indicator natin on sexual orientation. So these are the results. In terms of identity, okay? In terms of identity, those who were assigned male at birth, about 2% of them identifies as gay, and then about 4% identify as bisexual. Okay? So there's still a minority, but that's a sizable number. That's a significant number. You translate it to the population, that's a big number. No? Kasi ang young people, 15 to 19, 20 to 24 will be about what? 10 million? So if you translate that, that will be more than 100,000. Okay? And then you have the counterpart. For females, this is the interesting part. For females, more of them, reported identifying as bisexual. About almost 10%. Okay? Almost 10%. That's the identity dimension. Now we go to the attraction dimension. So for those assigned male at birth, you see that about 5% said they're attracted to both men and women. Okay? And then look at those who were assigned female at birth. Diba? 15% of those who are 15 to 19 said they're attracted to both women and men. Okay? And 10% among those 20 to 24. Very interesting. Very interesting result. Very interesting group. And then the last one is sexual behavior dimension. So here you can see a big proportion still have not had, never had a romantic relationship. That's the last two bars for those assigned male at birth, and then also for those assigned female at birth. So you still have a big chunk that has, have not engaged in any sexual activities yet. Okay, so these are the results. Now we go to the juicy parts of it. Let's start with risky behaviors. May difference ba between males and females? And then will there be differences across sexual orientation and across gender identity? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we will be using gender identity as a differentiating factor, and we will also be using for sexual orientation only the identity dimension. Okay, and then these are the different behaviors that we're looking at: is smoking, drinking, drug use, suicide ideation, and suicide attempt. So I hope we have representatives from the Department of Health online, para na makita nila how the picture looks like beyond the binary of just male and female. Okay, let's start with smoking. So these are current smokers. And this is disaggregated by males and females. And you can see here, so let me explain it first. So we're trying to look at the change over time from YAFS4 done in 2013. That's the older cohort. And then we have your cohort, that's 2021, that's YAFS5. Okay? So you have the gray bar representing YAFS4 and the red bar representing yes side. Okay? And you see a decline. I don't know if it's good news or bad news. There's a decline in terms of smoking among young people. And we're still trying to investigate that particular decline. Naging healthy ba ang young people? Or was it because of the COVID? Dahil we collected the data, at the height of the pandemic. Okay? Now, let's see if there's a different picture when we look at them across sexual orientation. Okay? So for the data across sexual orientation will be presented only for YAPS 5. No? Only for YAPS 5. So that will be, this slide will be across sexual orientation. And the first one will be those assigned male at birth. So ganun muna. Okay? The next slide naman will be across gender identity. So you're going to see 2 slides for every health behavior. Okay? So you can see it's a male-dominated, more males are engaging in smoking. Okay? Generally. And then across sexual orientation, not much difference. Lower among gays. And then for bisexuals, almost similar with the heterosexuals. And then for males, there's a different picture. You have a spike among lesbians. So nearly half of those who identify as lesbians currently smoke. No? That's something that we need to examine as well. Because we know that smoking is bad for the health. Okay? And they're engaging in smoking. And this one naman is across gender identity. Not much difference across gender identity, but you can see for the trans men, those who identify as trans men, more of them, 1/3 of them are current smokers. Current smokers. Now we go to drinking. So again, we expect, of course, more males, are current drinkers compared to females. And you can also see the decline over the 10-year period, okay, from 2013 to 2021. And across sexual orientation, mas pababa yung gays and bisexuals, still a very macho thing to do. And then for those assigned female at birth, you can see a different picture. So those who identify as trans men and those who identify as bisexual women, more of them are current drinkers. Bakit kaya? I would not be able to explain that, the reasons behind it. So I'll just presenting the numbers. So this would require future examinations, future studies, okay? And then across gender identity, more trans women, slightly more trans women are current drinkers compared to those who identify as man or non-binary. And then again, more trans men and those who identify as non-binary among those who were assigned female at birth are current drinkers. Okay? And then we do the other behavior, which is experiencing drug use. No? So siguro a disclaimer here will be very few lang yung cases nito. So the differences might not be reliable. It's not robust, the differences, because of the very few cases. So we're trying as much as we can to differentiate them across the categories. But in these instances, like drug use, medyo very low cases, no? Very low cases. So the results, the tests are not reliable. Okay? But you can see between males and females, there are more males who have ever tried using drugs. Okay? Across gender identity, the same, very few cases. Now let's go to suicide ideation. No? This is more interesting because as you saw for smoking, drinking, drug use, the levels decline over time. But in this case, for this particular behavior, the reverse happened. there was an increase on suicide ideation. Ito yung they ever thought of committing suicide. And it's both for males. The increasing pattern was seen for males and females, but it's more among females than males. So this is something that we also want to look at. And then across sexual orientation, you can see that there's a higher proportion among gays and bisexuals compared to their heterosexual counterparts. And also, a similar pattern can be observed for lesbians and bisexuals, comparing them with their heterosexual counterparts. So this is something that needs further examination. This is suicide ideation. Among them, let's look at those who attempted suicide. Attempted, hindi successful, buti na lang, no? Kasi kung successful, hindi natin sila ma-interview. Okay. So this one is a proportion. So still among higher among women. And then we can still see that it's higher among the gender minority, as well as the sexual minority. It's higher. Yung suicide ideation and suicide attempt. Okay, so that's some bad news there. We're trying to put a spotlight on. Okay, now we go to sexual risk behavior. Sino ba yung nag-engage sa sex ng mas madami? Is it males, females? And then we look at across sexual orientation and across gender identity. We have different indicators on risk behaviors. First, we look at sexual debut. That's the proportion of young people who've engaged in sex already. We try to look at mean age at first sex. And then we also monitor early sex, that's sex before age 18. And then we have indicators on casual sex, non-romantic sexual relationships or FUBU. You sometimes call it fuck buddies, friends with benefits, etc. We also collect information on commercial sex, being paid for sex or paying for sex. And then we also have technology-mediated sexual activity. So we have 4 indicators there. If they've sent or received sex videos, if they've engaged in phone sex, if they ever had sex with an online friend or text mate, and if they ever recorded themselves having sex. Okay, so these are the indicators for technology-mediated sexual activities. So let's start with ever had sex. So not much difference between males and females there. And you can see the pattern. There is a decline over the 10-year period. And then across sexual orientation, lower proportion among the sexual minorities. And then across gender identity, you can see that there are more trans women, apparently, that have already engaged in sexual activities compared to men and non-binary individuals. And for trans men and non-binary individuals assigned female at birth, lower yung proportion nila that who have engaged in sexual activities compared to women. Okay, those who identify as women. Now we go to mean age at first sex. So you can see here that it's about 18, no? It's about 18 years old when they started to engage in their first sexual activity. And then across sexual orientation, it's 1 year earlier, about a year earlier among gays compared to their heterosexual counterparts, and then about 2 years earlier among lesbians compared to heterosexual counterparts. Okay? Now we go to across gender identity, not much difference except for trans men having earlier engagement at about 2 years earlier. Now we go to early sexual engagement. That's before age 18. So men, more heterosexual men engage in early sex compared to gays and bisexuals. Similar pattern is observed among women. Across gender identity naman, ganun din, except for trans men. Although, as I mentioned, for this particular indicator, the difference might not be robust, might not be significant. But you can see here that more trans men engage in early sex compared to their counterparts. Now we go to casual sex. This is having sex with someone you don't know, okay? Or it can be 1 or 2 times. And you can see here that it's a male activity, more of a male activity than female. And then more gays and bisexual men engage in casual sex compared to heterosexual counterparts, okay? And then across gender identity, we see that more trans women and non-binary, among those who were assigned male at birth, engage in casual sex compared to their counterparts. Now we go to non-romantic sex. Ito yung may regularity na partnerships, sexual partners, okay? So it's slightly higher among gays and bisexuals, also slightly higher among lesbians and bisexuals compared to their heterosexual counterparts. Across gender identity, you can see that trans people, more common ang having non-romantic sex among trans people, both trans women and trans men. Also for non-binary among those who were assigned male at birth. Okay? Ito na yung commercial sex. So the test for this indicators will not be reliable because of the very few cases. So this one is ever paid for sex. So very, very minor, very, very few. And then this is across gender identity, wherein more trans women have ever paid for sex. And the other one is receiving payment for sex, okay? So here, there are more gays and bisexuals reporting having received payment. And yeah, it's more among those who were assigned male at birth. And then across gender identity, we have more trans women and those who identify as non-binary among those who were assigned male at birth, reporting ever received payment for sex. Ito na ang interesting part. So the technology-mediated sexual activities. Let's start with sending or receiving sex videos. So I'm not gonna ask anyone here in the room your experience on this one, but this is the general experience of your generation, okay? So it's more of a male, more males have sent or received sex videos, and it increased over time, from 2013 to 2021. Maybe perhaps it's a COVID effect because we were all confined in our homes, diba? And let's see across sexual orientation if there are differences. And you can see medyo mataas yung levels for gays, bisexuals, lesbians, and bisexual women. No? They've been sending and receiving sex videos. More than half of them among gays and bisexuals, and nearly half among lesbians and bisexual women. Across gender identity, you see a similar pattern, wherein gender minorities have a higher proportion sending or receiving sex videos. Let's go to the next indicator. that's engaging in phone sex. So more males have engaged in phone sex, but across sexual orientation, you can see that more gays and bisexual men have engaged in phone sex. Okay? Across gender identity, you can see that more trans women and non-binary among those who were assigned males at birth have engaged in phone sex. The next indicator is ever had sex with an online friend or text mate. So you can see more males, di ba? And it shot up from 7% to 18% from 2013 to 2021. Across sexual orientation, you can see that there are more gays and bisexual men who have engaged, who have had sex with an online friend or text mate. And then across gender identity, similar pattern can be observed wherein trans women and non-binary, more of them have engaged in sex with an online friend or text. Ito yung interesting. Have you ever recorded yourself having sex? So mas madami, tumaas siya for both males and females over time. And across sexual orientation, yes, you can see more gays and bisexuals have recorded themselves having sex, and more lesbians and bisexual women. Okay? Across gender identity, similarly, 12% among trans women and 22% among non-binary, among those who were assigned male at birth. And then trans men, about 29% recorded themselves having sex. Okay, so rest muna tayo doon sa mga sexual risky behaviors. Now let's look at the health status. No, yung well-being ng young people like you. Okay? We have two indicators, that's self-rated health and then life satisfaction. So how did we ask this question? So we asked them in general, how would you describe your state of health? Are you very healthy, healthier than average, of average health, somewhat unhealthy, or very unhealthy? So for this analysis, we group together the first two categories to be healthy, yung very healthy and healthier than average. And then you have of average health. And then we group together somewhat unhealthy and very unhealthy to be unhealthy. So that's how we group them. And these are the results. Okay, so we can see here that there are more males. Interestingly, there are more males reporting that they are unhealthy. They have poorer health compared to females. So it's opposite the expectation, because usually there are more females who would report poorer health compared to males. Okay? Across sexual orientation, what do we see? We can see that more gays and bisexual males reported unhealthy status. Diba? And then you can also see here that there are more bisexual women reporting poorer health compared to their heterosexual counterparts. And then we also ask them, across gender identity on the other hand, you can also see that slightly there's a higher proportion among the gender minorities that reported poorer health compared to their counterparts. Okay? Now let's go to life satisfaction. So we asked this question to the respondents. All things considered, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole these days? And then we gave them this scale from 1 to 10. 1 meaning very dissatisfied, and 10 very satisfied. So in this analysis, what we did was to group together those who reported 0, 1 to 5 as less satisfied, and those reporting 6 to 10 as the satisfied category. Okay? Ano yung resulta? So these are the results. So there are more males reporting that, slightly more males reporting that they're less satisfied with life in general or as a whole. Across sexual orientation, these are the results. So there are more gay men, and more lesbians and bisexual women reporting that they're less satisfied with life compared with their heterosexual counterparts. Across gender identity, on the other hand, you can see very far off yung results for those who identify as non-binary compared to those who identify as a man and compared to those who identify as a woman in terms of being less satisfied with life in general. No? So these are general satisfaction of people. We've not connected it yet with the sexual behaviors and other behaviors yet. So we're just touching the surface. No, we're just touching the surface. So we're down to the end. So I'll be providing the summary and implications of these results. So first, let me put on the first spotlight. So about 2% to 19% of the young people belong to the gender minority, no? Depending on the indicators that we've used. And then we have about 7% of males and 10% of females who belong to the sexual minority among the young people in the Philippines. So we have a significant proportion of young people who are considered gender minority and sexual minority. Okay, now we go to health risk behaviors. So we saw that smoking, drinking, and drug use are higher among males. And then for suicide ideation and attempt, it's higher among females. And we have a different story altogether when we look at these things, diba? When we look at across sexual orientation and gender identity. For example, we have more lesbians and bisexual women who are current smokers and drinkers. More trans men are current smokers. On the other hand, more trans women are current drinkers. More trans men and non-binary individuals are drinkers, current drinkers. And more lesbians have ever tried drugs. Okay? In terms of suicide ideation and attempt, we saw that it's disproportionately higher among gender and sexual minorities for all groups. So this needs a lot of examination to do, no? So we're highlighting here, we're putting a spotlight on this vulnerable group. In terms of sexual risk behaviors, we saw that more males have been enjoying sexual risky behaviors, no? However, there's no difference in terms of the age of sexual debut between males and females, but more males engage in risky sexual behaviors, and they also more of them engage in technology-mediated sexual activities. And we saw that, diba? We also saw that among our gender and sexual minorities in general. They've been engaging in sexual risky behaviors as well, especially engaging in technology-mediated sexual activities. So it's disproportionately higher among gender and sexual minorities. Okay? And then for the last part, for the health status and life satisfaction, unfortunately, they've been engaging in risky behaviors, but males, more of them reported poor health, and more also said they're less satisfied with life. More male. Okay? And then we also saw that in terms of health and in terms of life satisfaction, we have more gays and bisexual men and women reporting poorer health, and more gender minorities reporting poorer health. And in terms of life satisfaction, more gays, lesbians, and bisexual women are less satisfied with life, and more trans men and non-binary individuals are less satisfied with life. So given all these findings that we have, it shows that analyzing young people's experiences by sex only between males and females is lacking. Diba? Because it masks the experiences of other subgroups, like what we saw, the gender and sexual minority groups. And the data shows, the study findings show that they are more vulnerable to certain health and sexual behaviors. So this is an initial attempt of YAFS-5 to collect data on sex, gender identity and expression, and sexual orientation. So we're trying to advocate that national surveys in the Philippines, regardless if it's for young people only or older people or whichever groups, should include questions on this for us to be able to understand this highly vulnerable group. And I've only presented levels and numbers. I'm not able to explain the context. I'm not able to explain, I don't have a deeper understanding of the results. What are the mechanisms involved? Why these people behave this way? That's why additional studies should be done, no? Qualitative studies should be done to be able to explain context of these experiences further. We need additional data. We need additional research for us to be able to help our program planners and our policymakers in designing policies and programs and services to be able to specifically address the needs of the more vulnerable subgroups. In this case, gender and sexual minorities. So I think that's the end of my lecture. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I would like to also thank Miss Clarence Tanalgo and Quino Chico over there who helped me a lot. They provided technical assistance in preparing this presentation. Thank you very much. And also thank you for Ryan for moderating this session today. And of course, I also want to thank the YAFS team. It's a very difficult, endeavor and activity to launch and conduct a large-scale survey, especially at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. No? Kaya palakpakan naman natin yung YAFS team together with all the field people who help us collect the data. So maraming salamat.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Joy, for presenting a very comprehensive lecture on the risky sexual behaviors, health status, and many other topics of the minority youth. So to open the floor, maybe, do you have any questions? Students, go. Do you have any questions before you leave? Kasi hanggang 11:30 na class natin. Do you have any questions? Yes, Ma'am Elma.
And I hope it's something that you will write and turn into a paper. Siguro yung tanong ko, one of the findings that I was struck, no, yung risk behavior, like lesbian exhibiting higher tendency for smoking, higher prevalence of smoking and drinking, and sabi mo nga kanina, you don't have any explanation yet, no? But I'm sure you do. Pero parang, could it be that yung ano nga na they tend to mirror or to mimic the behavior of men as part of, that's what expected of them? I don't know. What do you think, guys?
Do you want, so we have another question from Zoom. From Shan Lagwata, how do Western gender categorizations, which are often borrowed into the Philippines, create confusion among Filipinos, especially when these concepts do not align with local language or lived experiences, leading to a forced fitting of behaviors and identities into these foreign frameworks? Maybe ito yung mga pronouns, no?
Yeah. Okay, I think these two questions are very interesting questions. So The first one, regarding the question of Dr. Laguna about the possible reasons why lesbians and trans men behave that way, trying to mimic, expectations um, from them if, well, specifically for trans men, if they identify as men, no? So they try to mimic the part of the macho culture and the expectation. Perhaps that can be one possible explanation. I think it needs a lot of further investigation. That's why we wanted more research and more researchers to to look at this to investigate these things. So as I mentioned, we're only touching the surface, no? Touching the surface. So for the question online regarding borrowing the concepts from the West, unfortunately, yeah, I mean, this is a very complex, topic and a complex issue, and it's very difficult to measure, no, in a survey setting. So I think this is an initial attempt by the YAFS team to be able to capture at least elements of gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression. So we recognize that we have our own ways of identifying in terms of our gender and sexuality in the Philippines, no? In the Philippines. Kaya we also had issues about translating the questions. So in the YAF survey, we translate the questionnaire into 6 different languages. 6 different languages. And it's a challenge to translate concepts, no? Translate the terms in the local languages. So we recognize that as well. So in future rounds of YAFs, of course, we're open to the idea of modifying these questions to fit our context. But for now, because this is our initial foray into collecting data on this, so we try muna to use whatever has been done in other contexts. Yan. But that's a very good point, and we also recognize that.
We have another question from Zoom. From Dr. Antonio Tamayao of CSU. What are the educational implications of these findings, particularly in terms of designing guidance and counseling interventions, as well as enhancing the curriculum in basic and tertiary levels?
Dr. Tony, hindi ko alam. Yeah, siguro we're able to develop a paper out of this analysis, and of course we wanted to share it to those who are in charge in designing curriculums and also for guidance and counseling. And I think this is the initial effort to continue sharing results of the YAFs to be able to feed into programs, policies, and of course the curriculum development, as well as guidance and counseling. I think it's very important that you mentioned about guidance and counseling, in as much as we saw that more of the gender minorities and sexual minorities have thought of committing suicide and attempted to commit suicide. So the mechanisms surrounding it, I think, needs to be further studied, so that not really special, so that the guidance and counseling procedures and help-seeking behaviors of the gender and sexual minorities will be addressed as well. Yeah.
Hello po. So actually that's one of the coming from guidance dito sa sa EDOC. Actually one of the things nga na I was looking forward was if there are qualitative components nga dito sa study, because that would have gleaned better insight into the perspective of the population. Pero yun nga, limitations naman siya. And actually, ang question ko would be yung dun sa component ng health. Is it purely physical health ang ano sa kanya, pagkaka-frame sa kanya. Because I think it would be a good distinction na parang yung satisfaction, life satisfaction is also quite different from mental health. Parang yun nga eh. Tsaka yun talaga eh, parang sayang ang daming nga sanang pwedeng masagot. Like there are many components like ano ba ang perspective when it comes to sex? Is it necessarily a bad thing? Is it a way for expressing yourself? Parang yun nga yung dun sa may more masculine people are engaging in the more risky behavior. So a lot of it could be ang dami niyang potential and really more research could really be done for this. Yun lang.
Yeah. So regarding the health indicator, it's self-rated health. So it encompasses everything. No? So it's generally accepted question on self-rated health. So we also ask that among older people for the longitudinal study of aging and health. So it's a general question on how you rate your health. So it covers both physical, mental, and all other aspects. Yeah. But I think they have questions on physical health as well. Tama ba? Yeah. So we still have other indicators that have not been studied yet. Yeah. Madami. That's why we encourage researchers online as well, those online. Please maximize the analysis of the YAPS-5. The government is spent for the collection of this data. So we need to analyze them and provide inputs for designing better policies and programs for the young people.
All right, do I have any other questions? Any other questions, Denzel? No more questions? This is Zoom. Well, perhaps we can end now the lecture. So thank you everyone for attending and joining us today. And thank you to, of course, to Miss Joy for giving us a wonderful presentation about minority youth. So also thank you to all those who attended via Zoom and Facebook. And we hope to see you in the next lectures. And of course, I'm sorry. Next week, we're going to have another one.
Then
Dr. Ben, uncle of University of Western Sydney from Australia. So he's going to talk about. I can't hear. Sorry. Anyway, so this November 8th, we're going to celebrate. UPPI is going to celebrate its 60th anniversary. Although it's limited. It's limited. So I won't be seeing my class this Friday, but I'm going to email you. Okay. All right. So thank you everyone, and we have a simple snack over there. So please serve yourselves. Thank you. Thank you.